What are some of the mistakes you see students make over and over again?
So I actually do this thing with my current students where I was teaching at the David Lynch MFA in screenwriting, where each week I'd read a whole lot of scripts and then I would have to give the students feedback. But what I would see is a lot of common errors. So I called them general comments that I would make on all the work. So it would apply to most students. And I've slowly started compiling these general comments. I've got quite a few of them. And a lot of these are very formatting type errors. But I think it's very important. So the biggest error is I think screenwriters forget that screenwriting is writing. It's words on a page. It's really important that you either put words on a page, read words on a page, rearrange words on a page. That's what you're busy doing. You're actually writing. You're not directing or creating a movie. You're writing. And that's the biggest misconception, I think, around screenwriters. Is some people think it's in the movie industry, so it must be fun and glamorous. It's writing. It's words on a page. And so having said that, some of the feedback around that is particularly words on the page related. So one of the first ones is there's no such thing as a house. And what I mean by that is a lot of students or first-time writers will go exterior, house, day. And then they'll say, Frank walks into the house. And I'm like, what house? What does the house look like? Is it a double-story house? Is it a mansion? Is it a ramshackle house? What is it? Words on the page, house. You got to tell us what's in your brain, otherwise a location scout's going to go find a location and that's going to be your house. So there's no such thing as a house. And there's no such thing as a park. There's no such thing as a car. So often in the first draft or first time writers will go exterior, house, day. And I want to say to them, just please be just suburban house or Dave's house or something. And then in the action sequence, do a little description. One, not a lot, please. Small little description of like a ramshackle, apartment. Or, if it's exterior, house, day. You can use house, but I wouldn't, because it's going to get complicated when they start doing a schedule. I would call it Sam's house or Danny's house or suburban house or something like that. But then in the description, tell us what's in your mind. We're not mind readers. And I think a lot of the time writers, when they're writing, they think they're going to direct the show or something, and so they don't tell us. But just a little description of what the house is going to activate the camera in the audience's brain, and they're going to see what's in your brain, and that's where the communication starts happening. And so there's no such thing as a house. Yeah, that's my number one.
Right, because the house in Home Alone versus the apartment in The Matrix, different,
totally different things. But I think they think because they can see it in their head when they're writing, the reader can somehow, through osmosis, pick up what they're talking about. And I'm like, no, we can't. So no such thing as a house. And there's no such thing as a man. Like a man walks down the street. I'm like, what kind of man? Is he a tall man? Is he a short man? Please, what's in your brain? And this actually comes down to semiotics. And this is why it's words on the page. It's like a tree. We know in semiotics, the idea is like if you say there's a tree, you're all picturing something different. And everyone watching this, when I say tree, you're picturing something different. So if you say there's a tree going in the garden, if you're not specific about what kind of a tree, you are not going to see your vision enacted in the way that you want. So be specific, but very importantly, without overwriting. So you can't say there is a lush green tree that has many leaves and roots in the ground. Just tell us it's a citrus tree or a stunted tree or a leafy tree. Maybe trees are all leafy. So again, it's where language gets specific, right? But it's use your words on the page to make sure that the reader activates the camera in their brain and sees what you're seeing in your brain. And that's why no such thing as a house, no such thing as a man, no such thing as a tree. Be specific without overwriting. That's my biggest sort of general comment that I get to writers.
Right, I'm thinking of different people that I've encountered, and just one person that I didn't really know, but there was an air of perfume in the air when this woman was around. She was obviously European, and she would walk very determined, and I would hear her high heels. And I just thought, that tells me so much. Yeah, I didn't know where she was going, but I knew that there was an intensity, and there was this aura of like femininity around her, very well put together, but I knew it was her. I knew she was around when I sort of experienced that.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just a woman walking down the street.
Exactly. And that brings me down to another thing, which is that when you introduce your characters and your main characters, there is a golden opportunity to cast your movie. And that is when you say, Frank, in his age or whatever, and then that little description, that 1 or 2 sentences you have when you're introducing your character, is where you can put that thing like high heels, always a scent when she's around. Now, we can't see a scent, but in that moment, we know what you're talking about. You're talking about something else. She's well kept together. She cares about what she... So all of this is said in that small little sentence. And in that moment, you're talking to casting directors, because that's what's going to be extracted from your script and sent to casting directors to try and find the right person that's in your brain. In your brain, again, it's about activating what's in your brain, putting it on the page so that eventually gets made. And that's where, if you can capture the spirit of someone, like you've described this woman now, on the page in that short, you've only got a sentence or two, please don't tell me where they come from and their backstory and all that. Because I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in the spirit of the human. And that's another trick that I see people getting wrong very often is, for example, if I say to you, exterior house day, Frank walks into the house. Who is Frank? What is he like? What is the house like? I know nothing. I'm going to impose what Frank is like from my own experience as a human in the world, and that might be very different to what you're thinking. So you got to watch out for that in a way.
Right, and where has Frank just come from? And what is his job? Is he coming home from work? Did he have a positive experience, a heaviness?
Exactly. And we may talk about that later when I talk about the scene before the scene. It's an acting thing about the moment before the scene. But what does your character bring into the screen, and how can you show that? Carrying a briefcase, the way he walks, is his clothes ruffled? There's things you can say about his character when they enter the scene that tells us a lot more about them. So you can't just say Frank has just arrived home from work. We can't see that. So activate the camera in your brain. What are you seeing? What's telling us that he's come home from work? Well, he's carrying a briefcase maybe, and he's flustered, and he's just flung something over his shoulder and slams the car door and walks briskly into the house. That means he's had a bad day, maybe. So use the tools available to you in terms of what the camera can see to show us who is this Frank in your brain.
But just real quick, I don't want to say Frank, a Chicago native, 45, who has never met a steak he didn't like. I don't want to say stuff like that. I want to say something carrying the weight of the world, walks in.
And it's a real art form, this, because you can say carrying the weight on the world. How do we see that? We can see it. You can see it. An actor can do it. A production designer can create that. So that's what you're always having a conversation with these people. You're having a conversation with your team. You're not having a direct conversation with the audience in the cinema. You are, but not directly with the script. You don't give your script out to the people when they watch the movie and they don't read it. But you're talking to them, but you're talking to them through a whole production team. And so, for example, the thing you were saying, you can't say that Frank has never met Julie in the script, because we don't know that. That's something that you have to tell us through the action. So,
Are there any other mistakes we should know about?
So, one of the things that I see coming up a lot is, and it can be summed up in this thing, is the order that we read is the order that we see. And I keep saying this to my students because it's very important. Again, it's about words on the page. Is that if you write a sentence like, I'm going to use Frank again. Frank's in this movie. Frank is sitting in the lounge, or Frank sits in the lounge eating his breakfast. The telephone rings, he picks it up, and then suddenly another character enters the scene, and doesn't enter the scene, but just you write dialogue where like Dorothy says, "Who's on the phone?" We're like, where did Dorothy come from? I didn't see her because you didn't tell me where she was in the scene. You need to say, unless you want us to be totally surprised by Dorothy suddenly appearing and saying, "Who's on the phone?" You have to say, Frank sits at the table, Dorothy next. So you're activating the camera in our brain. By the order that we're reading is the order that we're seeing things in our brains. So it can be applied even more more effectively if, for example, if you do a scene that's, say, set at a market and you say, exterior farmer's market day, and you can say Frank walks through the stalls, fruit sellers sell their wares, an orange rolls down on the floor from one of the fruit stands, Frank picks it up. You've taken us through an order. Our camera in our brain has been activated in order. Now, the power of this is you can change it around. You can say, exterior farmer's market day, an orange rolls on the ground. Fruit sellers sell their ware. Frank walks through the rows. Frank picks up the orange. You've changed everything around because now we're seeing the orange, then we're seeing the fruit sellers, then we're seeing Frank, then we're seeing him pick it up. seems really simple, this, but I see a lot of students and first-time writers getting this wrong, where they don't pay attention to the power of the words on the page and how this takes the order that we read is the order that we see. And you can just have such fun with that, because then you're pretty much directing on the page, which I know we're not meant to. You don't say close up, long shot, wide, or anything like that. But the order that we read is the order that we see. It's just important to remember. And I think it comes from writers having the scene in their head so clearly, and then trying to get it on the page, still having it in their head, but not quite getting it on the page the way it is in their head. And that's always the trick, right? Getting it in your head onto the page in a way that mimics what's in your head. So, yeah.
Let's say the orange rolls and Frank goes to pick it up, and the next thing he knows is this $1,000 pair of leather shoes has stopped it. And there's a tall man attached to those shoes, and he says, "Frank, it's been a long time."
Ooh, amazing. Yeah, right? That's great. I love it. What a cool scene.
So then he realizes whatever it is.
Exactly.
But so then we're painting it. It's not just orange rolls, Frank goes to pick it up, a man is standing.
Yeah.
There's more, because we're seeing the shoes, and those shoes carry weight.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where you have the power as the writer to, if you didn't write that thing about the shoe on the orange and just said there was a man standing there, we wouldn't see that. We wouldn't see that. We wouldn't have that power. We wouldn't have that moment that you have in your head. And that's the tricky thing. Of course, again, with everything in screenwriting, it's about brevity, brevity, brevity. So you don't overwrite, please. That would be a nightmare. But still know the power of your words and where you place them. And then it's the order that we read is the order that we see.
Okay, so maybe shorten that up, or shorten some...
Well, the way you described it was perfect, but I can imagine somebody getting carried away by saying, like, I've seen this as well in scripts actually, where it's like, now people are like, oh yeah, I can do this. Okay, so the brown leather shoe stomps slowly on the orange while we follow up the leg and the patent, I don't know, pinstripe suit thing and the man. It's like, this overwriting where I think borrowed from reading novels, and which is what most people do. They don't actually read scripts, they read novels, and then they come to screenwriting from having read lots of novels, and they apply the techniques that they've learned at school, even in essay writing, to screenwriting, and they mess up, because the next thing you know, they're using flowery language and language that's very articulate, and that's not what we're doing actually with screenwriting. We're clean and clear, precise language with the occasional flourish to let us into the story.
Going back to your early screenwriting days, what were some mistakes you made?
Wow. Luckily, all my early scripts are destroyed. I think probably overwriting to an extent, because I love words so much. So I was probably a bit flowery with my word usage. I think, again, not taking the audience into consideration as much as I probably should have. I had a very quick learning curve with the sitcom writing, because you had to learn, it was proper, I was paid to write, so it was a very quick learning curve. I think actually one of the biggest errors I made was misunderstanding symbolism. So I think that when you read novels, if you like magical realism or something where like there's all these symbols, everything has a great weight and meaning in a novel. It does as well in a screenplay to an extent. If you have somebody trapped in a telephone booth, it could mean something about the script. But there is a symbolic weight that is in a novel that's not in a screenplay. I don't really know how else to describe this. It's a bit abstract. I'll have to probably stop talking. But yeah, there's something about when we first start writing, when I first started writing, I think I expected too much from the audience. So I kind of wanted them to be into my world. But don't you understand that the diamond that she's wearing symbolizes this, and that this thing symbolizes that, and that therefore that's the meaning that I'm trying to communicate to you. So I relied almost too heavily on symbols within the thing, whereas film doesn't always work like that. It should hit us in the gut, not in the head. And that kind of way is in the head. I think it comes from so much movie analysis, where you've studied lots of movies, and so much reading of novels where like the tree symbolizes something. And one can get, if that's all you're relying on for your meaning, it can be very problematic. Now, David Lynch does that too, right? He has, in Twin Peaks: The Return, there's so many symbols. There's red rooms and jagged lines on the floors, and there's all these things that mean different things. But he still keeps us going through the story because he doesn't only rely on those. So I think that's the one thing I did wrong in the beginning, was I was too heavily reliant upon symbols and symbolism without still making sure that the audience was engaged. And that is where you can lose your audience if you're not.